Hey, Jade. Hey, Chris. Welcome, everyone. Another Chris, welcome. If you're there joining, jump into the web chat and say hello. Welcome, Luigi, Andy, Jeremiah, welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome, Ben. Welcome, Fred. Dave, welcome. Welcome, Matt. So if this is your first product talks, down the bottom of the screen here somewhere, there will be a chat button. Jump on the chat and say hello. Welcome, Sandra. Hey, Luke. Just take a few minutes to wait for everyone to join on. Whilst we're waiting for everyone, let us know how you're going. How's isolation going for you all? How's everyone feeling about today's number in Victoria? Yeah, I think a lot of people are disappointed about the number today. Yeah, maybe we won't talk about isolation. We'll give it a rest for the next hour and a half. So, doing some experimentation around the timing for this event. I'd love to hear what you guys think is an ideal time. Do you prefer lunchtime meetups during isolation or nighttime ones? Hey, Lee, welcome. It's good to see some names that I know on the list today. Welcome, Tina, Thea, Sue. It's good feedback, Matthew. Thanks. Why nighttime? Oh, wow. Germany, welcome. Oh, Stockholm as well. Welcome. We got a lot of Europeans. Singapore, welcome. Anyone else international here on the call? Just type into the chat box where you're located. Welcome, Matt, another international. That's good feedback. Looks like most people prefer evenings, so that's good. Good to know. All right. Well, we'll just give it a couple more minutes for some of the people to attend. It's been a while since we've caught up, so I thought also we haven't really done an introduction with a lot of people. So in the chat box, why don't you type in where you're currently working, what your role is, and what's your biggest problem at the moment, other than COVID? All right, we might get started, so I'll just share my screen. All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Product Talks Melbourne. I'm Steve, I'm your host, and also I've got Neha helping me out tonight, who is chatting on the webinar chat. So if this is your first Product Talks, this is a product management meetup that's been running since 2007 in Sydney. And Product Talks has recently expanded to many other cities around Australia, Asia, and even now South Africa. So we got lots of events happening all over the globe. So a quick note on how tonight's event will work. Many of you will be using Zoom at the moment for work, so you know that there's two modes, webinar and meeting. This session will be running a webinar, obviously, and we want it to be interactive, so please get involved. There's two ways that you can really get involved. Obviously the chat box, which we've got going at the moment, and also during the presentation, we'll also be using the Q&A feature. So along the bottom here, there's a Q&A button. Click on there, ask your questions there, and then as we're going through the presentation, Ken and I will be looking at those and trying to answer those for you. If you see someone else's question that you like, you can also have the chance to upvote that. So if you don't want to ask another question and duplicate it, just vote up someone else's. And if you're having any technical challenges, just chuck a note in the webinar chat and we'll do what we can to try and help you there. So if you don't know about Product Talks and Brainmates, Product Talks is a meetup that's organized across the cities by the team at Brainmates, and Brainmates has been championing product management since 2004. We see our purpose to help people and companies build better products to build a better world. And they do that through three ways. So community, training, and consulting. So in community, it's the events like this one, where product people can meet, share experiences, and network. And also in the community space, we also have Leading the Product Conference. And I'll talk a little bit more about leading the product later on. Training, Brainmates is a training organization, and they help people get into product management and also diversify their skills. And then finally, consulting. So Brainmates works with companies to help them solve their product management problems. So on the training side of things, there's some events coming up soon. So we've got the Moving into Product, which is a half-day introduction into a career in product management. This is kind of the new, for new product managers. There's the Essentials of Product Management, where this is the core product management training where you'll learn how to create market-driven profitable products and gain more delighted customers. And then Essentials of Product Marketing, which is more about how to run a successful go-to-market. And then finally, the Financial Fundamentals, which is building financial literacy for product managers. So if you want to find out any more information about the training courses, you can jump on the Brainmates website, which is the URL at the bottom of the screen there. So I mentioned Leading the Product earlier. So Leading the Product is a conference run by the team at Brainmates. It's Australia's largest product management conference. We have over 1,200 people attending in 2019. It's been running since 2015 and has sold out every single year. Now, obviously with COVID happening this year, they've needed to change it. And it's been reimagined and turned into an interactive digital conference. So on the 2nd of September, we'll be all getting together for an interactive day of joint learning and co-creation on the 7 Ps of product. So this conference is going to be really interesting. The audience will be taking control and there'll be a live audience participation, which will help shape the day. Attendees will make on-the-spot product decisions on each of the topics covered, and which will change how the day unfolds. So there'll be top-class product speakers like Stephen Haynes, April Dunford, and Kate Leto. But what sets this conference apart this year is really this audience participation and creating an ebook throughout the day. So soon, Ken hopefully will be turning up on your camera, on your screen. But it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Ken. Ken's a 20 years veteran in technology product management, and he's pioneered and teach the first product management course offered in the engineering school at UC Berkeley. It's got over 400 PM alumni in working in industry through that course. Ken served as the VP as product management at leading online education companies Masterclass and Linda, and he's currently an executive consultant and advisor for startup and scale-up companies. Ken's the author of The Influential Product Manager, which is a book on how to lead and launch successful technology products. So if any of you attended the April event for Product Talk Sydney, you'll know that Ken's presentations are always fun and lots of useful tips. And I know at the last Leading the Product conference, product strategy was a topic that everyone rated as one of the biggest pain points. So it continuously comes up for a focus of people. So Ken, are you there?
I sure am. How is everybody?
Welcome, Alex. So Ken, how's your isolation going?
It's fine. Many people may know that I am actually based in San Francisco, but Australian by birth. I came to Australia in March, expecting to be here for a couple of months to spend some time with family and for a friend's wedding, and to launch my book locally. And I guess one thing led to another, and I'm still here. And yes, I'm dealing with Melbourne isolation, which is not that fun. But at least I got here the week before they enforced international quarantine, so I didn't have to go through that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I'd prefer to be in the States or Australia at the moment. I think from a virus perspective, we're definitely doing a little bit better, but it doesn't feel like it sometimes. So.
No, I think so. I mean, it's a tough time, but I'm just super impressed about how everyone's been so adaptable, particularly with getting onto Zoom and working, and actually I think we've really shown that we can be very effective still. Obviously, we miss the personal interaction, but the kind of interactions I'm having, and just the fact that we've got people from all around the world able to join. I think accessibility to this sort of content's gone way up, and people are joining in and meeting people from all around the world. So that's the silver lining as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, we've got 51 people on the call so far, but I think one of the big things I've noticed is that webinars have become a lot more accessible. There's so much content, like you said. Traditionally, we would have had this in a room and it would have been a bit closed, and maybe people from Sydney and Europe unable to join the call. But yeah, it's been definitely a silver lining to this. So tonight's topic, product strategy, really interesting topic, and something that I think a lot of people get, confused. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this. But some people differentiate between product strategy and business strategy. Do you differentiate the two?
It's a good question. So here's how they are different. Here's how they shouldn't be seen to be too different. So they're different in that the business strategy is obviously more broad about, like, it'll include things like the business model. It'll include like how other parts of the organization are going to participate in the strategy, either around the product or just in building the company. And so a business strategy generally is larger. I'm actually working with a client right now, and we're just talking about this today. And there's branding strategy, marketing strategy, technology platform strategy, which is very different from product strategy. So these are all components of a bigger business strategy. That said, a couple of big trends that I'm noticing. Number one is that product-led companies or product-first companies are becoming quite the rage. And so companies where the product is the company, and that the product kind of sells itself, and all the thinking is about how to get that funnel or that flywheel going around the product, then product strategies become much, much more synonymous with business strategy. The other thing that I'll point out is that these should not be seen to be dependent on each other in such a way that you have to sort out your business strategy from end to end before you can do a product strategy. I think that's one of the traps, is that there needs to be all the answers around like, what are we going to do within the business before you come up with a product strategy. What I like about a product strategies approach is you actually come from the customer first. And when you do that, you can take that tack, almost sort of independently iterate on it, and then inform how you evolve your product strategy by the business strategy, as we'll see in one of the frameworks.
Yeah, I think they're a bit of a symbiotic relationship. You kind of move one way and the other one goes with it. So yeah,
Yes,
really
exactly.
looking forward to your presentation tonight
No
and
problem.
seeing what you talk to. So yeah, let you get on with it.
We will. Okay, so I'll share my screen. Okay. So, well, thanks everyone. I will mention the book at the end, and there's a couple of links there for you to get a deal on both a paperback and an ebook. Ebooks have been very popular right now, of course, because delivery internationally is not going so well. But today I'm going to be talking about building your killer product strategy. And really, when I say killer product strategy, I really mean quick and dirty product strategy, or a product strategy that's very practical and very pragmatic, something that you can apply straight away, get alignment, and then iterate on. And I found those to be by far the simplest to understand and the ones that can be the most compelling. So basically we'll talk about developing your product strategy. We'll talk about how it actually doesn't need to be a time-consuming, overly complex, or organization-wide kind of effort that gets bogged down by all those different obstacles. So we'll try to talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about 3 powerful, simple frameworks that are called strategic pillars, the Kano method and the KL method, that combined will actually help you inform a lot to define and articulate your strategy. They're very simple to use and very helpful to sort of zero in on the things that matter. And then I'll introduce 5 sort of key components that I think need to go into every product strategy. It's not the only thing, but if you structure your product strategy with these 5 things, you'll be checking a lot of the boxes. But before we get started, in the chat window, I'd like you to actually just throw out what you believe is actually in a good product strategy. What kind of components are typically included? And if we'll just, Steve and I will take a quick look at some of the chat and weigh in on some of the things that are coming on in. Please send to all panelists and attendees so we can kind of see all your answers.
So while we're waiting for people to type into the chat box, yeah, we might have a quick chat. What are some of the things you see that people do, think should be in a product strategy, but isn't?
The things that people neglect?
Yeah. Oh, no, sorry, things that people put in a product strategy, but shouldn't be there.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. Well, way too much solution specificity is the thing that I see the most common. Having having solutions in mind that are, and then design, and basically writing as if your strategy is about the features, is actually the biggest mistake to be made. And usually because you're being very, very prescriptive, but you're basically creating a problem for your team in that you're not really tapping into that creativity and allowing kind of a very broad like problem space to be solved. And the test is, if you think it should be or should not be included, the test is, if I radically changed my solution, you pivoted my solution to something completely different, would my product strategy largely stay intact? And if you can say yes, then you've probably got the right components in a product strategy.
Great. So there's some, all the things flooding through now. So we've got people mentioning vision, North Star,
yeah.
Roadmap.
Roadmap, absolutely. I have a specific type of roadmap I like to use there. Target market, absolutely. Vision, how to compete in the market. So how you position, how you think about your differentiation in the market, for sure. The problem is resolving. Yes, absolutely. I like KPIs. Yeah.
Size of the market.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think those are interesting analyses to include, but in understanding the size of the potential market and doing kind of that kind of market analysis it's informative, but it's not necessarily a strategy in itself. It's sort of a something that might help you prioritize certain things. How to delight customers in hard to copy margin enhancing ways. Nice.
Yeah, value
Great.
prop and key differentiators being there as well.
Yeah. Well, I think basically everybody is pretty correct. Really being able to include those sorts of things are super important to include in your product strategy. And a couple of things just in terms of organizing your product strategy is to really seek to tie together 3 key areas that in turn help you understand how the product will meet the market needs, fit within your business goals, and generate a sustainable, profitable and differentiated product over time. So if you think about one bucket that came up a lot there was these market needs, competitors and trends. So just sort of a deep understanding of what is going on in that space. If you think about another sort of overlap is, what are your business goals and importantly, what are your business capabilities? I think we often forget about that because importantly, you have to be able to be able to execute well. And then finally, what are your product benefits and your differentiators? How are you actually going to create a set of a product that's actually going to truly deliver against a set of needs there? Now, if you think about the overlap between a market need and your business goals and your capabilities, that's just an opportunity. If you think about what many startups are seeking initially is this product market fit. And they may have a product strategy, but more often than not, they're in a very exploratory mode and validating what the market actually needs to try to find a potential solution. And in some respects, prematurely getting a product strategy before you really understand the product market fit might actually be a bad idea. So your product strategy initially might be how to go and seek that product market fit. And then from there, build out the business capabilities and goals. So as you mature more, actually understanding where you might have a product business fit becomes something that I find is actually an overlooked concept. You can come up with ideas, but is your business the natural owner? Does it have the capabilities in place, or can you put it in place to nail it? Is it aligned with the long-term business goals? And it's not just some revenue that you're chasing. This is often, I find, a lot of ideas that come out from say, teams that are working in market. They might discover things that are happening in the market, but they're just not the right thing for that particular business to pursue. And you really want to be a leader in that. So if you think about those 3 spaces around that, right in the dead middle is that product strategy. And this is where you can really bring together all of the things that your business can do, what you want to actually achieve in the long term. Not just your product strategy, but your business strategy, but your longer term your reason to exist, your purpose for your company, as well as your underlying commercials, and you're bringing that together with the market needs and the product, the offering that you can deliver. That is the encapsulation of all of that is your product strategy. So a couple of other key rules to make this easier than a lot of people tend to really overcomplicate this. And many old school sort of scary product strategy efforts tend to try to boil the ocean in their scope, and make it just an inherently like linear approach, like I was talking about before, where there might be excessive market research, business analyst work, which could last many, many months. And I just don't subscribe to that in this very rapidly changing world, even for larger companies. So unless you're a truly absence of any data, which is rare, probably even your strong intuition and kind of enough evidence that you have, what I recommend is you just start with what you already know. So build from your existing understanding of the market, the business, customer, identifying those assumptions that need testing and iterating over time, but basically create your product strategy as if it's actually a hypothesis that you're going to be testing. And then over time, you figure out where the weaknesses are, where those assumptions that need testing, where some of the risks that you identify or the unknowns, they're the things that just lead into where you want to augment and validate and iterate from there. And really, if you focus on the big questions that matter the most at any point in time, you will very quickly iterate on your product strategy. So essentially, if you start with something that can be very, very strong and just keep on growing it, just like you would sort of operate in sort of an agile environment. It doesn't need to be right first up. And there's another reason for that. And that is that strategy really is at its most powerful when you treat it as a collaboration. It doesn't need to be right. It doesn't need to be something that's done in a silo that comes back with all the answers. Really what you're trying to do is get an assessment of your current situation as viewed by a cross-section of your stakeholders. You want a shared perspective on the path to go forward to achieve your goals. This results in a shared understanding. It's a plan of how you can move from your current position to take advantage of those available opportunities. It helps to illustrate how to your executives, how the product will potentially evolve and where potential areas of required investment are. For your teams, it just contextualizes their work, what's needed and why. It gives them a lot of good reason to understanding how their work fits in. And so the real value of the product strategy is not the artifacts, it's the process of alignment and getting everybody kind of deeply involved in that process without it being sort of something that overwhelms them, but they're brought along for the experience. So the three things you really achieve by doing this is generating the right set of context, getting that clarity for what you believe your path from point A to point B will be, and you will iterate on it. Like every plan, product strategy is just a plan. It rarely survives first contact in perfection, right? So it's going to change, but you put it out there as this is our path forward, and that informs in particular where you need to be testing and validating. And it generates the alignment. So what does a quick and dirty, good product strategy look like? So the very, very first thing is start with your vision. So there's going to be five things I want to introduce as the must-haves, if you will, into your product strategy. Now, a vision is basically an encapsulation of where are you going, for whom, and why. Now, there's a lot in there. A good vision is concise, overarching, unchanging, motivating, and aspirational. So I'll break that down a little bit. Concise in that where you're going, for whom and why might be many pages of analysis. And in fact, I strongly recommend that you include that kind of analysis that you have as kind of backup material to inform and kind of color your product strategy. But by being concise, by really zeroing in on literally one or two sentences to really crisply capture what you're trying to achieve, makes it so clear and easy to understand that any non-technical person can immediately kind of grok it. It's overarching and unchanging in that your solution can vary, but what you're going for does not. And then this motivating aspirational goal is it should be something that is difficult to achieve. It doesn't have, you should not know exactly how to get there necessarily, but it's exciting, motivating, aspirational, but it is actually achievable still. You want to start with your customer and their needs. If you anchor everything in their customer and their needs, the rest will follow. It should include a definition of your customer. I've got a couple of examples in a second. It should build upon that wealth of customer data, but really it boils down to an encapsulation of the customer that you're targeting, and that becomes kind of language that just in a couple of words instantly brings up this sort of picture of who that customer is and what they're struggling with. It should not just restate your product idea or the solution, which I touched on right at the very beginning. The acid test to that is being able to imagine pivoting completely away from the solution you have in mind, and the vision still stays true. So what would a vision statement look like? It can really be this simple. I've seen many written like this, and it can be very, very powerful. You need to understand, obviously, sufficiently the competitors, the alternatives, to be able to define your unique differentiators. So you need to do the work to understand your potential position in the marketing, what they're strong at. But at the end, you want to boil that down to what are we going to uniquely do better than what our competitors do. And by the way, ease of use and be cheaper, that's not a differentiator. It's really got to be something that is very, very defensible. So it takes a lot of work. Your meaningful problem clearly is the customer's problem that you're trying to address, or a need that you're trying to address. And the target customer is that person or that persona that you're targeting. And the value propositions are your benefits, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second. Here's just an example from my time at Masterclass of how we teased apart the different target customers. And so whenever we were doing anything, we were focused on 3 of these 4. We actually decided one was not one of our key personas that we wanted to build our product strategy around. But every time we were thinking about how to grow the service, we were thinking about one of these 3 on the left, but not Jay. Personas are actually great. These can be richer information on the demographics, geography, goals and values, motivators and inhibitors, technology, comfort and preferences. It's really just that archetype user that you can bring to life that makes it just a lot easier to describe that target customer you're shooting for. And it is okay to have multiple customers. In fact, if you're in an enterprise, for example, you will almost certainly have multiple user types, from the economic buyer to the integrator to the end user. It's important to sort of articulate those and be able to think about your product strategy as delivering against all those different needs. Just when I talk about your unique differentiator, this is an example of obviously direct competitors for Masterclass, LinkedIn Learning, one of my other companies that I work for, Coursera, Udemy. They're all online learning direct competitors. But it is important to think more broadly than that, because that's not how your potential customer actually thinks about solving their need. They have other alternatives. You'll notice some pretty interesting names on this list. You've got like Netflix. Well, how does that compete with a Masterclass? Well, it's competing for attention. It's providing entertainment. Pinterest. This is the home of inspiration. Masterclass is trying to inspire you through its learning. Physical classes are obviously an easy way, although not in our current time, to learn. And then there's a plethora of universities and traditional organizations that we're also competing with. So you have to think quite broadly about how you're positioning your service against all the different things that might be other ways that the customer is solving the problem. You'll see in this example, given these testimonials, what do you think the unique problem that Masterclass solves? Can I get a couple of people in the chat window throw out some ideas of what is unique about Masterclass's, if you will, differentiator or unique selling proposition? Good. Credibility, learning from the best. There's another thing that might surprise you. What if I said, I don't think that we're not a very deep education service? What do you think we are? The words appear several times. Personalized. I'm looking for, there's a word that is literally in each one of these. Yes, here we go. Create, creativity, to inspire. Exactly. So if you think about how we're trying to, or Masterclass is uniquely trying to position itself, it's learning from the best to really inspire you and open up your creativity, to give you permission to try things. I would not say that Masterclass necessarily is delivering hardcore vocation skill development, but it is a very creative and inspiring place to be. So you'll see how you really have to think about how that might work. So how about having a shot at the vision for my presentation? Who'd like to actually have a shot for this? Keeping in mind though, don't be shy. Just give it a go.
So are you looking for people to type into the chat box, or do you want?
Or you can yell out, Steve. You might even have a shot for me. What do you think my vision for this presentation is? Steve, do you want to have a shot?
Sorry, I was just waiting for people to see if they typed it in before I.
I'll pick on some people. I know some people on this call, so I'm happy to pick on them.
So I think your vision for this speech might be to educate, to leave behind a crystal clear strategy, a template, or a set of tools.
Yeah.
Or your vision might be a bit more bigger, I guess, a bit more. And you could say, oh, my vision for this presentation is to educate product managers globally, blah, blah, blah.
You're on the right track. You're on the right track. I'm noticing some really interesting answers here. How people change the way they think about product strategy and approach forming it. A clear, actionable product strategy for product managers to build meaningful and useful products for customers. Inspire people to create exciting products with clear strategy. Inspire the audience to create a product strategy on their own. All correct. But that's actually just my solution. That's just my solution that I'm delivering to you today. This presentation is about creating product strategy, but my vision isn't about creating product strategy. In fact, I have many product features. I do product presentations on how to think like a product manager, managing stakeholders, developing their skills, launching products, metrics. I teach classes. I coach teams across industries, and I work as a practitioner, so I keep current. So I only have one vision, and that vision is, my vision is to help you, product manager, become incredible product managers who deliver amazing products that change your users' lives, build sustainable businesses, and advance the craft of product management. What I do is interesting because I go beyond theory into hands-on practice, so you can apply and create value from what you learn immediately. Do you see the difference? That is the vision that doesn't change no matter what presentation I'm doing, so long as I'm maintaining that core value that I'm targeting, or the core people I'm targeting, what I'm delivering, and then that unique value proposition that I think is unique is that I aim to leave you with something that you could apply tomorrow. How does that sound? Much more inspiring. Good. Help product managers get their jobs done easily. Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. To build world-class product managers. Exactly. Now you'll notice I followed my little template there, which I'll just quickly bring up again. Is this kind of, which you'll get a copy of to be able to, you'll notice I followed that template, and it's that simple, yet it's very, very clear about what my purpose is. Great. So let's move on. Hard to sort of. Next really key thing in any product strategy is to describe your strategic pillars. These are what must we prioritize above all else and excel at. These are your core competencies. This is where the majority of your development effort, your time, your thinking, working with your teams, your stakeholders, all else should be in support of these. When you talk about things like scaling your platform or any supporting functionality, those things are not things you need to necessarily excel at. They support these strategic pillars. The strategic pillars are where you're really going to invest as much of your time as possible. And in fact, these are very helpful because they will guide you where you also should not invest. Because they're kind of like, these things are going to be what raises you above all else. Why do you necessarily invest in other things that don't actually differentiate you or make you stand out in the market? So these strategic pillars not only help you choose the things you should invest in, but they also help you say no and tell you what you should be ignoring for, in terms of non-strategic to your company, even if there's revenue to chase. I often refer back to my strategic pillars and say, why would we actually chase that over here when we could be investing in what really makes us stand out? This really helps us break out of this short-term thinking, particularly when you're trying to chase revenue or do one-offs for customers, for example. If you anchor your decisions based on your strategic pillars, you'll find very quickly that a lot of things we do don't make sense. These are choices that you're going to make to achieve your vision and goals. They are, I recommend 3-ish as a good number. I've seen 4, I've seen 5. And at least one of them needs to be one of those most striking differentiators. I'm going to show some examples. These are things that will guide your team, your prioritization, your roadmap, your conversations with customers, and your conversations with stakeholders. These are not your features and functionality. If you look at this example, and we saw things people pick up on this before, what is Masterclass key differentiator or core, one of our strategic pillars? Just jumping ahead, these are Masterclass strategic pillars. These are actually product pillars, but when you define the product as being product plus content. So that is a little caveat here, that this is not just the platform that I was in charge of, but also the content that went on top of that platform. The highest quality content, a class like a movie, anywhere, anytime access, learn at your own pace. And then that big differentiator is learn from the best in the world. Now, you can literally visit the website and these will jump out at you. That's how the market, how we position ourselves, we talk about ourselves. It's the value prop that gets you to sign up. This is, and when you think about all the things, the content and the product team, all the decisions that we would make would be, are we going to actually create a class like a movie? And you go into Masterclass and everything, the production value is just out of this world. And by the way, I loved working with my content counterparts. They are some of the best in the business in terms of their ability to create this beautiful, rich, very immersive content. What did we invest in? When I joined, we were just a web platform. But by really identifying the anywhere, anytime access and understanding kind of different use cases that our customers were running into, it became an absolute imperative to invest in mobile, in the living room, in short form learning, as well as very immersive long form viewing. So we had to really think about how to repackage a lot of our content. Not easy. And then learning from the best in the world should be pretty self-evident. But there's a whole process of instructor selection that is extremely complicated to ensure that we're actually making sure we're picking not only people who are going to be good teachers, but they, and obviously are the best in their field, but they're going to be teaching something that they're very passionate about. And when, of course, you're passionate about something, you do a good job at it. Here's a couple of other companies you might know. Amazon, largest selection, lowest price, fastest, easiest delivery. Who's heard of the Impossible Burger? Accessible and affordable. In other words, they've driven the cost down by innovation, which they're maniacal at, to improve that quality, yet get to the same price or cheaper than fast food hamburgers. And accessibility, they are now in partner restaurants that you see everywhere. That's been such a big focus of theirs. Protein, iron, and nutrition, same or better than meat. So what they're wanting is to make sure that it is actually a meat substitute in for real. And how do they really differentiate themselves from, say, tofu burgers? Uncompromisingly delicious and performs in the kitchen. Here are some of the things they've invested in. Taste and smell, the texture, how it bleeds while cooking, the sizzle that comes out from heme proteins that are very difficult to replicate. All the while, it's not from animals and it's sustainable, but you'll notice that they've really focused on how do we build something that is an easy choice, because it is by far as good at or superior to meat. How do you find your strategic pillars? One methodology that I like to use is the Kano method. The Kano method is actually much, much richer and more complicated in its full form methodology for prioritizing and identifying and prioritizing priorities. Read up on it. It's super valuable just in terms of a concept. But if you think about what really makes a big difference, you've got on one, if you think of one axis on customer satisfaction and another axis in terms of completeness. Now, by completeness, I mean to the extent that you have fully served that need. So as you go from the left to the right on completeness, you've invested more and more in it. And you will see on one extreme, you have this basic needs, which basically aren't strategic pillars. The more you invest in them, the more you don't necessarily drive up customer satisfaction. But if they don't work, you definitely have big dissatisfiers in your business, in your product, sorry. So think of those as core investments, things that you just need to invest in, but you want to know when to stop investing because they don't actually improve the satisfaction of your product. But then these other two areas, the performance needs elevate your product. They are linearly, as you invest in it, they linearly improve the product. They are generally things that customers expect, like speed, that's why they're called performance, or cheaper, or better in some way. But delighters are things that they don't expect. And when you deliver them at some high degree of completeness, you will dramatically exceed their expectation. If you look back at the strategic pillars that I just talked about, if you're masterclass, you don't get props just for being excellent content or anywhere, anytime. You get props because you can learn from the best. That's the delighter. But the performance of higher and higher quality content and more access, that's more on that linear side. So think about like where your investments might lie. And if you see a lot adjusting in basic needs, you have not figured out your strategic pillars. Those things, again, delighters, truly differentiate your products. Their benefits your customers are probably not even asking for, but they're thrilled when they're delivered. Performance needs, elevate. They're linear. Their customers want more of what they probably already have, and they compare that to your other choices. And then basic needs are minimally required for your product to perform. These are not unimportant investments. They're just not strategic pillars. Here's another easy way, if you've already got a product in market, to think about what your strategic pillars are. And believe it or not, they're probably just those value props. That's why you see them so visibly on your on the websites. They're from the user's perspective. They're individually compelling. They're collectively exhaustive. In that together they deliver a raft of real benefits, and they're very relevant to the customer. They're not trivial. They're not a business benefit, something for you. How many times do we have conversations with stakeholders about our product strategy? And it's all about what we're trying to achieve as a business. For us, that's not a product strategy. That's certainly not a strategic pillar. And they're not a solutions description. So I like to say, okay, let's build up from our features all the way up to our value propositions and see if we can actually identify our strategic pillars that way. So turning it product statements into them customer statements will be very powerful. Now, we're not going to have much time today to do this exercise, but I'm going to walk you through very quickly through the exercise. I'll throw out some things, but I recommend practicing this on Airbnb and seeing whether or not you can get to the essence of their 3 strategic pillars. So if you think about their features, now normally this would be a 2-hour-long workshop, so we would have like 20 minutes to do this. Because we're doing it in an hour, we won't have that time. But if you just think about the features of Airbnb, what typically comes out are all the different things about like welcoming guests, or affordability on the website, selection, lots of different types of options, locations everywhere, the search functionality, the pricing functionality, all the different kinds of features that you can imagine that Airbnb has invested in over time. If you then now group those into specific areas that seem very similar, groups will emerge. And over time, those will refine to be the pillars, and those will then be what you can then focus on. And it's quite easy if you think about Airbnb, so it's very, very popular. But if you look at their very, very first deck, this is what they presented. This was their problem statement about price, hotels leaving you disconnected from the city and culture, and there's no easy way to book a room as a local host. And their 3 strategic pillars that resulted, and this is literally from their very first, and I think they've stayed pretty true to these in terms of their initial pitch deck, was to save money while traveling, make money while hosting, and share culture that is your local connection to the city. If you think about what are the performance things there, everyone wants to save money. I expect to save money when I travel. If I'm a host, I would love to make money, and you expect that. But then the differentiator, the delighter out of these 3 is all about sharing culture. Now, you may argue whether or not they've done a great job of that, but this is at least kind of the way that they were thinking about their unique value proposition when they first pitched it. And if you look at the features that have evolved over time and brainstorm those, invariably you'll kind of group up into these 3 pillars. Okay, moving on. Sorry, we had to skip the exercise. The next thing is to include your North Star and the outcomes that you're describing. Now, I've seen a lot of really bad product strategies that include business cases and lots of analysis and financial things that you get lost in very quickly. I prefer to say, how are you going to measure success? How do you know that you're going to have arrived at your destination? And so this is where you do get to talk about the business outcomes as well as potentially the customer outcomes. But they're in terms of how do we define success? What metrics are we actually trying to move over time? Generally, you start off by stating the desired business benefits, which is usually creating some kind of profitable, sustainable business. Not always. Choosing one North Star long-term customer outcome to guide and inspire you is just great practice. What is that? Perhaps such a lagging and very difficult to measure thing. Like in EdTech, we often talk about the North Star is actually about making a difference in people's lives and being able to help them find employment or discover and learn skills they never thought that they had, or to inspire them to greatness. Very hard to measure, very long lag before what you did to actually see whether or not you impacted them. And then there's lots of other factors at work. Well, that's okay. It's a North Star because you get to augment those with these smart product KPIs. Now, smart KPIs are kind of, they're more leading indicators. They're more controllable, more like about the product. They demonstrate the customers are getting value out of your product. And they're not vanity metrics. They're just distractions. Whole definition in my book about what those things are. But they're really about trying to make sure you understand what is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant to your product actions, and timely, meaning that you can get a fast enough feedback loop to be able to measure and see your results. How do these kind of fit in? You've got on the outer is the metrics. These are values that are important to track and evaluate over time. Might include your North Star. It include things that will be potentially very hard to measure quickly. Your KPIs tend to are the leading indicators that fit in between, that are faster to measure and should have a clear correlation, if not causality, with hitting your broader success criteria metrics. You can cheat though. Remember, it's a hypothesis. That's why often we'll talk about things like engagement levels as a good proxy for retention, and retention as a good proxy for delivering that kind of North Star outcome. And more tactically, you might have a set of OKRs which are much more constrained. They don't go in your product strategy, your KPIs do, but your OKRs or your plan for a shorter period of time will tend to fall out of those, and they should all relate together. This will be a takeaway in the PDF that you'll leave with, which is here's a set of different metric and KPI categories that include things like commercial success, the kind of funnel metrics like acquisition, activation, retention, and advocacy, which is really closing the loop. Qualitative metrics around happiness or customer satisfaction exist here too. Just because they're qualitative does not mean they don't belong in your KPIs. And then there might be some more pragmatic or more health-based metrics, both business and technology. Things like organizational, things like your return on your investment is an important thing that you're wanting to track. If you've got flywheels or funnels or things, how are you getting those cycles working and understanding those? Whole other conversation that I don't have time to go into. And then just operational things like product development. One of the biggest examples of this for me was helping team culture shift from these big, long deliveries over 3 months into much, much shorter iterations by measuring how quickly they build something and deploy it. So getting that time down. That's kind of an example of a product operations metric that can go into your product strategy. All right, I will quickly move on. A fourth thing, and this is where we start getting into more specifics. And this is about what work will we focus on. Some might call this a roadmap. That's fine. A roadmap is absolutely a fine answer here, but it doesn't need to be a fully fledged roadmap. And indeed a timeline-based roadmap, I think, are going largely out of favor as a product strategy because they prescribe too much or they seem like too much of a commitment. So it can be something like more like the horizons or a step-by-step to get there. But essentially what you're trying to do is identify the big rocks, the things that really you need to focus on, and maybe, in what sequence they're going to actually move the dial for you. So these are what initiatives will most advance your strategic choices, accelerate your learning, or reduce risk. So there's 3 different things there. What things are going to help you learn faster and maybe change your product strategy? What things are going to increase your confidence that you're on the right track? And then what investments you're going to be making in those pillars. Really the key here is to just align on those key initiatives. So you're connecting now vision, strategic pillars, outcomes down to kind of tactics. You see how this sort of unfolds. And now you're getting to a layer where you can really illustrate kind of the way that you think you're going to get there in tangible terms that is very motivating for a team, yet doesn't prescribe too much of the solution. You can illustrate this as a roadmap. I've also seen this as milestones or stepping stones, and don't limit it just to the technologies. Think about the entire customer journey and make sure you're thinking through all of that. Won't have time to go through this example, but this was used by the founder at Masterclass to actually think about what are the key risks, and essentially each of these became a milestone in the business for product and content to test against. So if you think about, like, this is an example of that kind of big rocks of how to actually unpack the problems I want to tackle and in what order, and then what are the minimum viable product that will actually allow us to test each of these assumptions and get enough of an answer to move to the next one. So it started off with everything from just, will consumers be interested in classes taught by celebrities? Well, you could do that by a fake website. You can do that by obviously user research, all the way through to can we actually produce high enough quality classes cost effectively to make this a viable business? So these were all the steps that were unpacked. If you want to think about how you can apply something like this, I don't recommend that you just roadmap on your own. I recommend actually using the KJ brainstorming method as a way of unpacking and bringing your stakeholders into that kind of group to identify what these big rocks are, and then get consensus, at least some level of consensus around those groupings. So you can actually have, as part of your product strategy, the outcomes are alignment. If you build your roadmap in isolation, then you're probably going to fail. So I won't, again, go into too much detail, but essentially the KJ method gets the best of both worlds, which allows you to both have individual brainstorming, so you don't sort of have groupthink going on, that opens up, and that's very broad-based, that opens up to increasing levels of kind of group discussion, pushing on like areas of constructive conflict until you kind of arrive at groupings that you can then package up to be your milestones. Very simply, recruit a stakeholder group, make that broad-based. Don't just focus on your senior exec. Try to have a very good cross-section. Make sure that you break out your strategic pillars and ask each in turn, what can we do to achieve this? What can we do to achieve this and this? Individual brainstorm allows people to kind of come up with their own ideas without biasing each other, which is a very dangerous thing when that happens. And then they take it in turns to share and place up on kind of your whiteboard or your strategy board underneath each of the strategic pillars. And then as a group, you start grouping, naming them, and then you'll start seeing these themes emerge that will be these big rocks of areas of investment that or initiatives that you need to be putting on your roadmap. Vote for groups, not individual items. So you'll notice a lot of these things will be solutions, and you want to abstract that out a little bit. You want to make sure that it's not lots and lots of features. How does that group up into sort of some kind of group a group that could be packaged as an initiative? Rank those groups, observe the emerging themes. Those themes become the big rocks, almost like swim lanes on a traditional roadmap, and you're done. I like to actually get my contributors to fill out a worksheet ahead of time, so they're actually almost defining their own version of the vision and strategic pillars first. And then I did this with a company. It was just fascinating to see the differences of opinion, and it actually created more conversation and to align around the strategic pillars than it did on the brainstorming of the product work. But then you might want to have them also, so you get not too many people in the room. People, they get to interview their stakeholders and bring back more than just their own ideas. And then the post-its are obviously a great way to do that. There's plenty of research online about why the KJ brainstorming method is so powerful, so I definitely recommend you read more. Now, the final thing, and we'll be just 2 to 3 more minutes, the next important thing that is often overlooked in a product strategy is how you're going to work. How you're going to work together. And this is, how will you work together to accomplish your goals? I think this is so important because laying out so much of your product strategy and all the things you're going to build is for naught if you don't have the right, if you've not set up the right processes and culture and explicit norms within your team about how you're going to work together to achieve those goals and have them permeate through your team, that to actually be successful at executing against those. I'll show you a couple of examples. But these essentially are cultural principles. These do not need to be very long. Most of mine are 1 or 2 pages. And they explicitly discuss and capture those norms and values that you want to work as a team. And you want to actually make them challenging, to force constructive conflict and guide difficult trade-offs. Good principles might say something like, we value this side of the market than this side of the market. So if it's going to come down to a trade-off, do the right thing for the buyers and not the sellers. Or it might be something that might be, we value learning. Any mistake is a valid mistake to make once. And it gives the team permission to test and try things. So it's those sorts of things that really, they're not things like we value we value nice user experiences, or we're a courageous team, because those things don't mean very much. They're kind of platitudes. You want to get to some of the core of what are the behaviors that exist today that I want to change, or what are the behaviors that I want to introduce, and how do I create tension in my team so they're really obsessing about how to execute against this product strategy. So one group might be what we value. This is a real version that actually was from lynda.com, which was part of a kind of a launch of our values as we were building out our product team. What we value, the lifelong interactive learning all the way through to, you can see there's stuff about members coming first. And then how we work. These were actually pretty big changes for our teams around how we iterate, we ship, we test. Notice we do that in that order. So that was forcing some behavior changes, deploying gently, and also how we partner with the rest of the organization. So those were certain things that we felt like we needed to tackle as part of our delivering our broader strategy. And so that's basically it. This is a little cheat sheet of what goes into a great product strategy and why. And don't forget, it's just a draft, it's just a hypothesis, and you validate and iterate from there. And as promised, here's where you can actually get the book if you would like to get a copy. Or please feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn for the future, or if you've got any questions that we don't get to today. I see a big list coming into the chat room, so I'm looking forward to getting into those. But please do connect, and I'd love to open it up for questions, and you've heard enough of my voice right now.
Great. I've been seeing some questions coming into the Q&A, so we'll get to those. Afra's, sorry, this is a hard name to pronounce. Afra's Beshhati. Can you share an example of good product strategy?
Share an example of good product strategy. In terms of an actual specific product strategy, no, because these are often secret, right? I can definitely say I've seen bad product strategy in it. And so good product strategy is the absence of some of the things I was talking about before, of being overly prescriptive of the solution and way too long. That's bad product strategy. Look, at the end of the day, like the measures of success for good product strategy are the following things. Can I talk to team members and do they get it? Can they feed it back to me? Can they say what the strategic pillars are, or the ways of working, or what our next big rock is going to be? If they can do that, then you've really nailed it. If that's all over the place, you might have a good product strategy on paper. You don't have good product strategy yet.
Great. Is there any types in the sort of strategic pillars and the flywheels. You've mentioned that a couple of times. Is a flywheel a way of generating a product strategy?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. Flywheels are kind of a little bit of a new thing. I mean, not that new, I guess, but the I've seen KPIs in particular. That's where it really exists, is sort of in that KPI layer. Well, no, that's not true. Strategic pillars and KPIs, a flywheel is a good way of like thinking about the virtuous circles in your company and how one feeds the other. So for example, it's often overlooked, how do your engaged, loyal users actually help you drive growth? It's often not seen to be as a growth. It's about like maybe just extracting more money from those users or getting them to come back more often. But a flywheel would say, well, actually, they should be feeding top line growth, new user growth as well. So how have you made that path easier, particularly through advocacy or through natural viral kind of loops within your products? And these loops exist everywhere. In really great product-led companies, the product kind of is at the center, and all teams are actually seem to be trying to accelerate loops within the companies. Marketing, branding, your design group, your customer service group. Like, how are they actually helping drive more satisfied customers? So it just flips how you might think about some of the roles of the different parts of the company, and identify areas of investment that might otherwise be overlooked. In particular, things that are maybe traditionally thought of as cost centers, or things that seem to be not part of the product. It forces you to think about the whole customer journey, from marketing through to, helping them get a physical interaction or a touch point with a human. If that's part of your value delivery, you've got to be thinking about all of that. I saw just something on the Pirate metrics there. Funnels are great. They're similar to flywheels. I think flywheels have just the particular, I again won't go into too much detail, but they're trying to illustrate a particular way of thinking about the system that you are actually building and how to de-bottleneck that system and accelerate that system. Funnels are just another way of thinking about the steps of your customer relationship over multiple interactions with your product. Many products I've run in, many customers or clients I've run into often think of on a very transactional level. Oh, I get visitors to my website, they engage with the product, they may buy something, and it's kind of one and done. And thinking about funnels is more about like, how do I evolve that customer relationship over time, but it also meets the customer where they are. So it's no good trying to push like an upsell to a customer that hasn't even kind of properly onboarded yet. And interestingly, as I've looked at many funnels, so much of the problem is not even in the first month of using the product or first year of using the product. It's in the first 5 minutes of using the product. So it Pirate metrics or funnels or some of those KPIs that I called out, they're just good ways of saying we need to be thinking about that full experience. And if the onboarding doesn't get as many people through, then that's where we need to be really focusing. And of course, unless I elevate that as a metric, what get measures get fixed, I will overlook that. Now, if I just think about like total number of customers, vanity metric, or even just repeat rate, I'm overlooking the journey there. And so that's why that's a more valuable product KPI than some of these other things.
Right. Matt Richmond has asked, if a North Star is supposed to be guiding for your business, shouldn't it be leading and not a lagging metric? It's hard to follow a North Star if you can't see it.
Well, you have to see the North Star, but it is out there.
Yeah.
Right. So if you think of just purely on a time horizon thing, by definition, it's kind of lagging. Maybe it's just semantics, but North Star should be inspirational, aspirational. It should be something that seems really hard to achieve, but it's sort of mission driving for your product, and maybe even all the way to your business. So that's kind of my definition of it. But really, don't worry too much about the semantics of it. have both big, audacious goals, as well as things that you can really get your hands around in a rapid time frame that should correlate with you delivering against your delivering success. If you have that kind of raft, not too many, but I'm talking about like half a dozen. If you have those metrics defined, you can really get your team to focus and get your stakeholders super excited about the progress you're making, even if it's very hard to measure that big lagging, big audacious hairy goal.
Yeah. So Sandra has asked, apart from a tendency to put solutions into product strategy or make the strategy too long, what might be the most common mistakes you see being made?
Oh, it is, sorry to be a broken record, it is seeing the product strategy as the document you produce and not as the collaboration and the process that you go through. Case in point, client released rolled out a strategy that had been worked on by a small number of people, and it was neat, nice. It had all the right stuff: vision, mission, business model, customers roadmap, and even kind of a new branding kind of element to it. And everyone just rolled their eyes at it because it wasn't buying, and it just felt like this seems too hard. And it just wasn't. It wasn't. And what happened? It failed.
Yeah. So the outcomes, not the output.
Yeah.
Cool. Louis,
and not iterating on it. That's the other thing. So it's a living document. Sorry, that is actually very important too.
Yeah.
It's a living document. Okay, you don't change it every week, and it should not be flipping wildly. If you're pivoting your vision, something's wrong. You can pivot your solution a lot and find the right course, but not that level. However, refining it as you learn more about your customer, their needs, as you deliver things or fail to deliver things because you've learned something new, updating it, and making sure you keep people current with that. That's the other mistake I see made. It's like, done, in the bookshelf. Let's go on.
Never go back to it.
Yeah, go back to our day jobs and that thing, or we'll look at it again in a year when we do a strategy reset, like an annual process. No, it's not an annual process. It's got to be living and breathing. It's why it's got to be so simple. It's got to be no more than, distilling down to like a couple of each of these things. These 5 things are a few pages at most each.
Yeah, I heard recently a large organization in Melbourne has the saying, strategy is always on. I think that's the right way to approach strategy these days. Is it's not something that you do an annual business planning session sort of thing. An offsite, strategic offsite shouldn't exist. It should be a monthly check-in or a quarterly check-in or whatever it is. To continuously iterate that strategy.
Absolutely, but that's hard because once KPI is just a great example. It's so hard to baseline those well, define them well, get a shared understanding. Then actually moving them is hard, and tracking them over time, and then telemetry or within your product and everything. So that's a major investment in its own. I've actually found a lot of the struggle is that just even getting your hands around actual numbers. So it's always on because you're always having to try to invest in it to sort of get a better set of insights.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's such a challenging part of the job is that it's like a constant tug of war in 8 directions. So Luigi asked another question, which is it normal to revisit the strategy every now and then, especially I think we just answered that question.
Yeah, but it is not normal to do a wholesale reset or massive investment in strategy. Literally, people will just refuse to participate after a while.
I'll jump down to Farah 10. How do you make the product strategy a dynamic, accessible artifact within the organization?
Yeah. Love to hear some ideas from the group. I think my by keeping it simple, that's going to open up a lot of possibilities. Few other things off the top of my head is don't make it dry. So, when you're describing the customer, for example, bring that customer to life. Use their own words, their own testimonials to describe the problem. Don't write your problem description as if you're some kind of, scientist. Bring it alive. I think I just saw this. Sandra correctly. Visualize it. Like, how can you make this into a neat diagram or a way of like kind of conceptualizing it? It should be something you can put up on the wall.
Sorry, I was going to say pre-COVID, I think it was common for people to put these sorts of things up on walls where people walk past regularly. So it's in the sort of on the way to the bathroom or to the near the kitchen, those sorts of things where people see it regularly. Visualization is such important. And during COVID, I think this lockdown period, it is very hard. But there are tools out there that can help with this sort of stuff.
Absolutely. I know people who do internal blog posts, webinars. They take aspects out of it. So they just like randomly will have parts of the KPI dashboard and it'll be clear. And then it'll literally be mapped to the strategic pillars, which is a good reminder of, or it might even be a flywheel sometimes. Like, here is our organizing framework that we've been drilling into, and here's the numbers lately. There's just some nice ways of doing it, but don't overinvest in it. You're only going to get people to engage at a certain level. The key is, if you collaborate well, you make it simple, you get people excited about it, and then you just constantly try to remind them in small ways, emotionally as well as sort of objectively.
Yeah, I think the other one I would mention is probably leadership support. So getting it communicated in as many times as possible. So I think I read that people don't hear things until the 7th time. So the more ways you can communicate things in the different channels where people see, I think we suffer from fragmentation in our work at the best of times these days. So Put it on Slack, put it on email, put it in webinars, Q&As, ask me anything, those sorts of things. They're all good ways.
Yeah, clarity is important, which means that you say the same thing sort of over and over again, and you might feel like a broken record. If you start feeling like that, it's probably a good thing. And I agree with you. I think one saying I've heard is even a little bit more like depressing than that, which is that people will only take something seriously when they've heard it sort of more than 3 times, and to think they've heard it 3 times, they need to hear it 7 times.
Right.
So it's like, to even begin getting through on the importance of this, it takes a lot more. But look, it's just part of the communication. And look, if you don't refer back to it in your decision making, or if you suddenly in your sprint planning get your team to work on all this short-term iterative stuff that doesn't somehow map back to those things, yes, you can do that a couple of sprints. But if that's all you're doing, then you've wasted everyone's time.
Yeah, that's right. Now we are running quite over time, so I'll sorry to the people we didn't get to the questions. But yeah, thank you, Ken, so much for your presentation today. It's been fantastic. You did share some links to your book. We will send those tomorrow with a link to the recording and also to the presentation slides. So thank you again. This has been fantastic. And I know at leading the product and also just through feedback that I see regularly, product strategy is one of those areas that people are so fascinated and so find it's sort of like a black box, right? You can go in all sorts of directions. So.
It absolutely has. So I'm glad that people got something out of it, and please do hit me up if you've got any more questions. But thank you. It's always a pleasure to be able to interact. Obviously, I'd love more interaction and be able to see lots of faces and really talk to folks. But thank you for your attention. I've noticed a lot of people have really stayed the distance. So thank you.
Yeah, numbers are still pretty good considering the time. So, and hopefully soon we'll be able to, depends on how COVID goes, but fingers crossed we can get into a real room at some point and get to meet some of these names that are popping up. And yeah, we might just give a couple of extra slides just on a few last thoughts. So my screen should be up now. All right. So, I mean, obviously with the COVID situation that's been happening, a lot of people are finding they're out of roles at the moment. And I was quite I was quite surprised this week when I jumped on LinkedIn to look at current roles around. And yeah, so there's quite a few roles actually being advertised in Melbourne at the moment. A lot of the big product companies seem to be hiring again, so that's good change, and so hopefully we'll see the market pick up again over the next couple of months. So if you are looking, please reach out to these organizations and have a look on LinkedIn. We've also got BrainMate's website, a product management jobs page. We've always got up-to-date listings, and if you are hiring, please let us know. We can add a listing on the BrainMate's website. So yeah, thank you again, Ken, for tonight's event, and thank you for your talk around product strategy. There's been lots of good feedback already coming through in the webinar chat, so that's been great. Thank you, Neha, who's been prodding people along in the chat box and answering questions and helping with Q&A and that sort of thing today. And thank you everyone who attended, and for the group of you that have stayed the distance, thank you for doing that. As I mentioned, we'll be sending around an email over the next couple of days with a recording. We'll also be sending out the slides and some discounts to Ken's book. We do have 2 more events coming up soon. So we've got another one coming up in August, on the 13th of August, and that will be a Leading the Product panel in preparation for the Leading the Product event. So yeah, class ride makers from head of product from Stan, Caitlin Blackwell from Seek, and Jeremiah Lee, engineering manager, will be talking through the 7 Ps of product, which is the theme for Leading the Product. And then later in the month is our next meetup, which is how to start a business when all hell is breaking loose. So Ben Crothers will be taking us through how he started a business. It wasn't going so well, and then he decided to apply some product principles to his business, and has pivoted that now into a successful consulting business. So yeah, thank you everyone again for attending, and I'll see you at the next event. Thank you.